I heard a cute little story I want to share with you. So a bird is flying south for the winter. Doesn't make it along the way, gets caught in a winter storm. It's very cold, can't fly anymore, falls to the ground and is shivering, about ready to die, to be frozen to death. Just then, because he fell in a cow pasture, a cow comes along and the cow, drops a cow patty on the bird, okay, some dung. And man, it went from bad to worse, right? But after a while, all that fresh cow patty is pretty warm and thaws the bird out. So the bird now is happy and starts to sing. As it's singing then, a cat that passes by hears the bird singing, goes right up to the bird, digs the bird out, and then promptly eats the bird. Oh, I know. 3 lessons. Not everyone that dumps on you is your enemy. And not everyone who tries to rescue you after someone's dumped on you is your friend. And then finally, after being dumped on, sometimes what you should not do is open your mouth. It's a cute little story that is a bit of modern, secular, conventional wisdom. But how does that jive with the spiritual wisdom that is in the Bible? Well, I think we get an insight into how to deal with hardship in the Bible in our second reading from Paul's second letter to the Corinthians, chapter 12. In this, we hear about the thorn in Paul's side. And we've all heard this before, and many people have speculated, what was that thorn? And what is this passage about? Well, we don't know what the thorn was. It was some sort of hardship. It could have been a physical hardship, like a disease or some sort of impediment. It could have been a mental, emotional. It could have been a spiritual battle that was going on. It could have been something that Paul was struggling with morally. We just don't know. But we know that it was real and that Paul struggled with it often. Often? Yes, because Paul mentions that he went to the Lord 3 times and asked the Lord to remove it. 3 is a perfect number. It's one of those perfect numbers in Jewish numerology. It means completion. It means fullness. So 3 times then alludes to the fact that Paul was asking the Lord probably several times, and we don't know, but maybe over years, to remove this thorn in his side. And of course, thorn in his side is not a real thorn. It's something that is symbolic of what he's struggling with. We'll stop right there. Right there is a good place to pause and just take notice. Because you and I, whenever we experience hardships in whatever way, living in this world as it is, one of the things sometimes that we struggle with is, but I'm a good person. Or, I'm a good Christian. I don't deserve this. Or, he or she, like someone close to us, or them, they are good people. They're followers of Christ. They don't deserve this. Or a mix of that. So why doesn't then God take this away? Why doesn't God intervene? Why doesn't God hear my prayers, answer my prayers, and solve this situation that I'm in or that they're in? Right? And what we assume in here is that because we're followers of Christ, that somehow we should be exempt from this. And when we're not exempt from this hardship or that hardship later, it's the reasons why we start to doubt or get angry at God, or our faith is shaken, or any number of other results, because we are making decisions based upon faulty information. And when we figure out God in this way, in a wrong way, then it affects our relationship in a wrong way. And now we, on our part, because of that faulty information, that misinterpretation of who God is, it can really rock our world as Christians. This is something that a lot of people at some point in their lives go through, or we see others go through it. And it's one of the reasons why people exodus worshiping God or being a part of a religious community, because of something that has happened, and they're like, I don't deserve this, or that person deserves it, don't deserve it, and they're out. Okay. So, St. Paul. Here's St. Paul, the guy who wrote close to half of the New Testament. Pretty big deal. And one that history calls the greatest evangelist of the Gospels. Big. So you would think then that if anyone should be exempt from the thorn in the side, it should be St. Paul. And when St. Paul asked, please remove this, that God should jump on that right away and remove it. But he doesn't. What's his response? My grace is enough for you. Meaning, I'm not going to remove this. You live in a broken world, and there are broken people. And you yourself are broken at times for many different reasons. And if I were to remove this time, I'd have to remove that and that and that and everything else, not just in you, but everyone else. And my friends, that's called heaven. That's called heaven. And we're on a journey to it. But the road leading up to it is filled with thorns. And you and I have to decide what we're going to do with those thorns, just like St. Paul had to decide. God's not the cause of those. God from the very beginning didn't want suffering and death for humanity. We brought that on ourselves. So Jesus says to St. Paul, my grace is enough for you. I'm not going to remove that thorn, but what I'm going to do is give you my grace. What does that mean? I'm going to, as you experience this thorn, I'm going to give you what you need, not just to get through it, but in fact, if you allow me and my grace to use this thorn as a way to get closer to me in this life, and therefore to be ready for the next thorn and the next thorn and the next thorn, and help others along the way with their thorns as you then get to heaven where there'll be no thorns. And that's a decision that you and I have to make as we live in a fallen world. What are we going to do with our thorns? Right? The thorns could be our sins. They could be the sins that others have sinned against us and hurt us. They can be our own sins and how that can cause confusion and a host of other problems. They could be our physical health, or somebody who is close to us, who we love, who is suffering. It could be mental, emotional. It could be a variety of things. But what are we going to do with them? Well, here's the deal. When they come to us, not if, but when they come to us, God will always come to us with His grace. And His grace will not only help us get through them, but His grace will indeed help us grow in faith, trust in Him more, become stronger, get through this, or even this remains with us for a long time. And this transforms our lives, our way of thinking and feeling and acting and being in relationship with God and others. And from that, we learn things like patience and charity and generosity and waiting and trusting and sharing and helping others and being selfless, being self-aware and being other-aware and being more aware of God. In all the ways that He can break into our lives through the thorns and make us more and more the person that He knew that we could always be, and not despite the thorns, but because of the thorns. He can use everything. And by the way, He didn't even exempt His Son from the thorns. And those thorns became our redemption. In our thorns, we can unite to those thorns. And that redemption can get deeper and longer and wider and broader inside of us. And then outside of us, into the lives of so many other people. And that's a decision that we have to make every time we're struggling with thorns. God is always available to us with His grace, but we are not always available to God to receive His grace. And therein lies the rub, but therein also lies the opportunity. Because the more we become and allow ourselves to become available to God's grace, the more that grace gets inside of us, the more grace we have, we fill up with more and more grace, and then we're able to deal with those thorns in ways we never would have been able to deal with without having gone through them. And that's then what Jesus says next to St. Paul. He says, "My grace is enough for you, for weakness, power is made strong in weakness." Power is made strong in weakness. It almost seems to be contradictory. But Paul goes on then to say that then he will boast. In fact, he does boast in his weaknesses, in his hardships, and his failures, and the persecutions, and the insults, and so on, because it is when he is weak that he is made strong because of Jesus Christ. So then what God can do is He can take our weaknesses, because we live in a broken world and we're broken. And when we give those to Him, when we open ourselves up to His grace is more than sufficient, more than enough, and it becomes more and more inside of us, and then our weaknesses become our greatest strengths that not only get us through life and across life with all of its thorns into heaven where there are no thorns, but then because we become stronger and stronger, and the Christian way of life is not just about me and God, but about us and God, along the way, then we're able to help other people out in their weaknesses. We become more attuned to them. We become more sensitive to them. We become more generous with our time, with our love, with our presence to them. We listen to them. We're more empathetic. And we have the tools and the skills and the experiences and the grace and the presence of God available to us to pass a lot of that on to the other person. And now you just not have one, but two, but then you have four, and then you have eight, and it just exponentially grows across families, communities, the entire planet. This is the way that Christianity works. But if we get stopped on step one, this shouldn't be happening to me, God, because I'm a Christian and I follow you, so you need to take care of this. Then none of this other stuff happens. In fact, the very blessings we look for are not going to happen. We want to snap our fingers and think that faith is magic. No, it's a person and a person in a relationship. And he's available to us, but we've got to make ourselves available to him in the midst of those thorns. So those thorns then become roses. That when we look back, and sometimes not even when we look back, but even over time as we're going through them, we thank God for them because we know good is going to come from them. And then we share these roses with everyone else. And they become beautiful for them and life-giving for them as we all journey together to heaven. Beautiful. Hard to hear, hard to live, but truth nevertheless, and the stuff that we're looking for anyways. Because who here isn't looking for a deeper relationship with God? And who here doesn't want to use their faith to help others get to heaven? Well, this is how, my friends. This is one of the ways. I want to end with this. How to become more aware. Self-aware, aware of others, aware of God. Not just in the thorns, but in the good times of each day. There's this thing called the Daily Examine. The Daily Examine. It's been around for 500 years. It was put together by St. Ignatius of Loyola, and many people will do it. Just look it up. It'll give you the steps, but here they are. Step one. At the end of the day, you just stop before you go to bed, ideally before you're in bed, because sometimes when the head hits the pillow, we're out like in 30 seconds, right? So you stop before you get in bed, and you just recognize that God is aware of you. And I just need to take a moment to be aware of him. So the first one is presence. Putting myself in the presence of God. My mind, my heart, all that. Second step is this, gratitude. Gratitude. Looking back on your day and looking at all the ways that God has been with you. Maybe it's been in the thorns, but maybe it's been in love and laughter and hanging out with somebody that you really care for, or a success in the job or in the classroom or whatever. And in each one of those, you thank God for that. After the gratitude, the third step is review. You do a review of your day in regards to your failures, your shortcomings, that thought you had, that word that came out of your mouth, words that came out of your mouth in regards to this or that person that you now see and regret, or your actions where you fell short of the Christian that God calls you to be. So you review that. Fourth step, sorrow. Sorrow not in the sense of like what the enemy wants to do with it, and that is to beat you up and press you down and keep you away from God and just wallowing in shame. No, sorrow in the sense of after being aware of our thorns and our shortcomings and so on, giving it all to God. I just give all this stuff to you, God. I know you're a merciful God. I know you love me, and I know you want to extend to me mercy and forgiveness. And just give it to him and let go of it. And then the fifth one is resolution. You resolve for the next day to learn from those moments of gratitude. All the ways that God was with you. To learn from the moments when you reviewed and you saw that there were shortcomings and problems and hardships and all that kind of stuff. And that you were forgiven. And the resolution is, with your grace, God, because I know your grace is sufficient for me, then I know that you'll be with me in every moment tomorrow. And you use all those moments, the good and the bad, to get me closer to God, you. Make me more aware of you. Make me more aware of other people and how I can help them. And how we can get to heaven together. The daily examine. We all have thorns. We're always going to have thorns. Jesus says, my grace is enough for you. The decision we have to make is, what are we going to do with that grace and that thorn?